Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's information briefing. I hope that you are safe and well. Today I'm joined by the Commissioner of Police, Ian McGrail, who will no doubt have a lot to say about the enforcement of the lockdown regulations, particularly so over the last few days. But first, today's statistics. The COVID-19 figures, as at this morning, are as follows. Total number of swabs taken, 2,827. Results pending, 141. Results received, 2,686. Negative results, 2,444. Confirmed cases, so far, 144. Recovered, so far, 132. That leaves us with 12 confirmed positive cases today. In the last 24 hours, there have been 26 attendances at A&E, 8 with COVID symptoms, all of whom were swabbed. There has been 1 admission to the COVID ICU and 4 admissions to the COVID John Ward. These figures include the new frontline targeted and systematic testing program, where 397 swabs have already been taken. The results I have given show that since yesterday, we have had 171 results received with no additional confirmed cases. Still, we have 141 results pending, of which 84 are from the frontline workers' targeted and systematic testing. The aim of this targeted testing, as you know, is to identify the presence of the virus among us by testing individuals who work in the front line, as there will be many people who are carrying it who are asymptomatic. Our numbers in general are still relatively low and manageable. But unless we are careful with how we behave, we will spread this. If we spread the virus, we are putting lives at risk, especially vulnerable people who are over the age of 70. It is time to reflect on how we behave when we are out in public because of the effect that this could have on all of us. Let me start by saying that we continue to be in lockdown. In the last week, you have seen that we have started to relax the lockdown provisions. Last week, we made provision for people who are over the age of 70 to go out in order to undertake exercise. We have provided safe spaces for them to do so on weekdays during the golden hour, during specified times and specified locations in order to mitigate the risk. As of yesterday, businesses have started to operate, subject to restrictions and public health measures. We are starting to unlock the lockdown in a way that is controlled, so that we can measure its impact and it will be reviewed over short periods. But our unlocking measures must be gradual for them to be effective and to avoid our services from being overwhelmed should a surge occur. This does not mean that the lockdown is over. The lockdown continues and is very much in place. Our message to you is the same. Do not leave home unless you must absolutely do so. If you have to visit a shop in Main Street to buy something that is non-essential, you must go alone. That is what the law says. The shops are open. If you must go to a shop, go to the shop and return home. This is not a time to be walking up and down Main Street to socialize. This time will come, but it has not come yet. It seems that the more often that people go out, the more complacent some seem to be. Many forget social distancing rules, especially when they meet close friends and loved ones and feel tempted to greet each other in our normal, warm ways. The reality is that we are very privileged in Gibraltar. Among other things, when it comes to shopping, we don't even have to go out if we don't want to. So many businesses have changed the way that they sell to us that they are now delivering to our doorstep. They continue to offer this service in order to reduce the number of people in shops. We should continue to take advantage of this fact, and it is available, and we should shop or continue to shop this way for now. Hairdressers are also open for business, to the relief of many, I'm sure. But their business must be by appointment only. Be sure to call up and make your appointment before visiting your salon. Do not turn up without an appointment or have to hang around waiting for your slot, or worse still, hang around town or sit somewhere with a drink if the wait for your haircut is a long one. These are all breaches of the lockdown regulations. Breaches of the law have consequences, as I am sure the Commissioner will explain. Is it so hard to get organised and pick up the phone and make an appointment to visit the hairdressers before you go? These rules are in place to limit the number of people who are out, as well as for the safety of the staff in the establishments that you are visiting. These same rules apply to beauty salons and estate agents. Now is not the time to let down your guard. You do not relax and let down your guard when you're at war. This is no different. We are at war with an invisible enemy, and we must not let the enemy get the better of us. We have done very well so far, and that is thanks to you, as a community, for following the rules. Let's not lose the battle now. Our advice to stay home and only go out if absolutely necessary, therefore, must continue. A lot of what we have done hinges on legislation that has been drafted specifically for the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Since February, a dedicated team of government legal drafters and those who produce our government gazette have been working tirelessly on ensuring that our legislation is fit for purpose to prevent, mitigate, and control the spread of COVID-19 in Gibraltar, to give effect to our government policy, which is based on scientific advice and on public health advice, in regulations that are made under the Civil Contingencies Act 2007. The first pieces of legislation regarding COVID-19 were published on the 31st of January by notices to make COVID-19 a notifiable disease. Little did we know back then how much we would have to legislate. Since then, we have seen a total of 47 pieces of secondary legislation of varying degrees of length and complexity dealing with the issue. Most of it has been drafted internally by our lawyers from the government law offices and the Ministry for Justice, usually at short notice and on many occasions late in the working day. Other government lawyers have also been involved in drafting legislation where it touches on their particular department. In many cases, the legislative solutions that they have prepared have needed to reflect decisions that have been made that very day by the government, while ensuring that they are proportionate and constitutional. I am grateful to them and to the Attorney General, who has personally certified this, for the way that they have been able to adapt to drafting legislation so quickly and well in an area of law that none were experts in a few short months ago. The need to produce legislation quickly has also meant that there has been a need to publish this at very short notice in the Gibraltar Gazette. This team, a part of the Gibraltar law officers, have published the COVID-19 legislation in 28 separate editions of the Gibraltar Gazette, 24 of which have been extraordinary gazettes. That is not the usual weekly publication of the Gazette. 7 of the publications have taken place after working hours on a weekday, and 4 on a weekend or a bank holiday. You may have noticed that 5 were published last Friday on the May Day bank holiday. This was required because of the life of the regulations, and this meant that most of the team were working with me on this throughout the day of the bank holiday. Publication involves not just the preparation of the Gazette and the legislation online, but also the transposition of any amendments to any other legislation included into the versions of our law on the Laws of Gibraltar website. Again, I thank the staff of the Gibraltar Gazette for being able to turn around the publication of these necessary pieces of legislation at such short notice and outside their usual hours of work. Thanks to their work, we have in place a legislative framework which initially slowed the appearance of the virus in Gibraltar by imposing restrictions on travel from certain countries and requiring self-isolation of those who did return from those places, imposing a lockdown first on certain businesses, then on people over the age of 70, and then on the whole population. Also imposing price controls on certain items, postponing the referendum and the lottery, creating temporary accommodation for the homeless, changing legal rules regarding certain court services and the registration of births and deaths, and creating the Beat COVID regime. As we move into a new phase, I am certain that we will be able to continue to rely on them to provide the appropriate legislative measures and advice that reflect government policy and the scientific advice to navigate our way out of this emergency. I would like to thank the Attorney General and his team of government lawyers, Paul Peralta, Kevin Warwick, Nadia Cisarello Parodi, and the Gazette administrative staff, Jason Segovia, Wesley Fernandez, and Douglas Pitaluga. Thank you. Before I hand over to the Commissioner, I would like to express my thanks to him, his team and his officers for all the work that they are doing during this time. The Royal Gibraltar Police, who are supported by their colleagues from Customs and the Gibraltar Defence Police, have a hard job to do, and they do so very well. Please do not make it harder for them than it already is during these challenging times and the lockdown rules. They are there to enforce a law which is for our collective benefit and is designed to save lives. This is a time to respect the law, not to try and find loopholes in it or to try and cheat it. If you try to abuse or break the rules, you are not clever. You are being irresponsible. And you are likely to be putting the rest of us at risk, and not least will result in adding pressure to the GHA services unnecessarily. Think about that carefully. This is a process. We must be responsible if we want this process to succeed. We are all in this together for the benefit of Gibraltar, especially those who are over the age of 70, who are the ones who are most at risk. That just leaves me to ask you to ensure that you follow the rules, that you follow the public health advice, that you stay home and stay safe. Keep well, everyone. I now pass you over to the Commissioner of Police.
Thank you, Minister, for those expression of support towards our law enforcement officers all around Gibraltar. Before I start, I'd like all viewers to please join me in wishing the Honourable Minister a very happy birthday. I know the norm has always been for politicians to work weekends, but normally on days like these where you could spend them with your family, I'm sure that you are missing all that like everybody else. But in any case, happy birthday, Minister.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My last address to you all on the 21st of April, I explained how challenging and complex it was to police the emergency regulations which provide for the community safety measures we are all very aware of. I say complex because from the very beginning I wanted to strike the right balance of how the theory behind the regulations was to be upheld in actual practice and in a manner which was lawful, proportionate and fair. I say challenging because, as I have said before, in Gibraltar we police by consent, and I've had to give very serious consideration to the impact our enforcement activity would have on the legitimacy of the RGP and our relationship with the community. In a way, policing of the stricter earlier regulations and versions of the regulations has been easier to manage. With the gradual lifting of the restrictions, I envisage most challenges for policing. Challenges from members of the public who push boundaries of what Public Health Gibraltar and government are trying to achieve. We cannot for a moment lose sight that the existing measures and their gradual unlocking are considered and implemented on public health and economic advice. During the easing of restrictions, I would ask you not to feel sour that it is the police who are telling you what to do and what not to do, or what is allowed and what is not allowed. We are the tool that give effect to what the law states on the advice of public health and economists. We are here to ensure the individual and collective safety of Gibraltar. But what is clear is that this responsibility is very difficult to uphold by ourselves, even with the support of other law enforcement partners. It is much the responsibility of businesses and the individuals to support the policing efforts, to mitigate the risks of a surge of the virus. And therefore, I will refer to one of the principles of modern-day policing created by Sir Robert Peel in 1829, that is 191 years ago, and which still remains ever so relevant today, and more so during these times. The founder of modern-day policing said, "The police at all times should maintain a relationship with the public that gives the reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and the public are the police. The police being only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the interest of community welfare and existence." So what did Sir Robert Peel mean when he set forth this principle? He meant that the police, my colleagues and the whole of the force, are members of society. We are all in this together. The police are paid to enforce the rules of society. And that everyone, every citizen, has a duty. The duty is incumbent to follow and to enforce the rules of society. Community welfare and existence refers to those rules which are needed for the good of us all so that we can live together, which is precisely the situation we face today, with our government fluidly issuing and tweaking rules for the benefit of all of us as we navigate through the pandemic. In essence, the founder of the Bobbies said that even though the police are paid to monitor society, we are also members of that society, and that everyone has a similar duty. And so I say, start policing your very own selves so that we, as a society, can pull through this a lot better. And I say this because I strongly sense that many people have formed the mindset that they are immune to the virus, or that it is worthwhile taking unnecessary risks. These people will no doubt be the same ones who will offer views that the public health crisis we're all living through was inappropriately handled by the authorities when the virus spreads and potentially starts claiming lives. Regrettably, it seems that the penny will not drop until fatalities begin to occur. I most sincerely hope that we do not become the victims of our own success after the great community effort displayed to suppress the wild spread of the virus. But like the Minister alluded to, if people fail to assume responsibility for their behaviours, ignoring public health and abusing the exemptions of the law, COVID-19 will spread, and some of us will pay the ultimate price. You can ask the Italians that, or the North Americans, who didn't take this seriously initially. What we have noticed since government announced the easing of some restrictions is that many people have used this opportunity to push through a false sense of security, that everything is back to normal, when we all know that it is not. There are still many restrictions in place, and I apologize for re-emphasizing this, but it's ever so important. You can only go out to exercise, to go to the doctor, to walk a dog, to attend to the care of a vulnerable person. And now, under the easing of the restrictions, you can also, for example, shop for non-essential goods and attend a hairdresser or a barber's shop. But this does not mean you can show up at the barber's shop without an appointment. Again, repeating the message from the minister. And if asked to move on by a police officer, go and sit in the piazza, waiting for your turn, which is an hour away. That is not what the spirit of the unlocking is meant to provide. It does not mean waiting outside a shop whilst your wife or your husband or your partner does the shopping. It does not mean relaxing and doing some people watching sat on public benches or gathering groups with people who you haven't seen for a long time and hug and kiss. It does not mean going down to the small boats marina and hanging about on a berthed boat with a picnic and friends, because we are treating this area like a car park. What it does mean, though, is go to shop, but what you need to get it and come back home. Have your haircut by all means, and then get back home. Do not remain wandering around the streets. Do not head off to the beaches or the Upper Rock, because we are controlling access. And we are publicly pushing that out constantly, so there's no excuse for people not to be aware of these. I have said it all along, we fully understand the stresses the restrictions bring on us. Enforcement is not a preferred option, but we will process people if they do not take heed or instructions or requests made by officers. I'll now move on to the latest data up to 8 o'clock this morning relating to the interventions our hard-working officers have made with regards to breaches of the COVID-19 regulations. These statistics cover the period of the 23rd of March to 8 o'clock this morning. Overall total interventions stand at 965, which I can break down as follows. 48 persons have been arrested. 12 have been reported for process. 83 persons have been taken home in accordance with the powers conferred by the regulations. 438 persons were requested home. And 384 have been warned and offered advice. From the overall total of 965, there were 216 that were over 70, just a small rise to the few weeks ago that I provided the same statistics. But please bear in mind that the data in this regard includes the period before the restrictions for the over 70s were modified to allow for exercise. When providing you with these figures, I want you to know that our officers do not turn up for duty to spoil your day or to infringe your rights. We are here to help our beloved Gibraltar come out of this in the best way possible. In addition to the interventions I've referred to, we are constantly dealing with other crimes and calls for our services. And I must say, officers are responding to this admirably. Many a times, comparisons are drawn with the policing with the United Kingdom, and indeed, we are modelled as such. I am in close communication with our counterparts in both the UK and across the border, and can proudly say the manner in which the officers of the RGP and partner agencies have stepped up to the plate during these times stands out remarkably when compared to these other nations. Yes, we are a small jurisdiction, but we feature as a police force with the lowest percentage of record of sickness absence in the whole of the UK, overseas territories and Crown dependencies. Our sickness absence averages just 2%, where the UK average is 10%. I am told that the levels for the GDP and customs are also very low, which is extremely encouraging. I want to thank all law enforcement officers and support staff who operate behind the scenes. Our frontline officers, supervisors, planners, admin staff, commanders, our media team. A great all-round effort, indeed. Before I finish my address, I want to highlight another seemingly silent risk that is out there and which should remain very prominent in our minds, in the minds of parents and guardians of young children. I know during these times of being asked to remain at home, our nerves and patience can be tested to great lengths. But I would ask you not to drop your guard on what your kids are doing online. Who are they accepting as friends on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and the likes? Who is following them? Who are they engaging with? What sites are they visiting? What apps are they using? Your child may be a teenager who thinks he or she are adult enough, but the reality is they need your wisdom and guidance. Talk frankly to your children about issues related to health, well-being, body image, sexuality online, as well as bullying and posting hurtful or misleading comments. Make your child aware of the dangers of sexting and inappropriate use of webcams. There are predators out there, and some so-called friends that are not really friends when they share compromising selfies. Give your child control of their own budget to download apps and music, but equally it's okay to agree boundaries so they manage their money responsibly. Don't give access to your child to have access to your payment card or other financial details. It is important to stay safe and stay at home, but it is also very important to stay safe online. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Commissioner. We will take questions now.
I have a question for both of you. Earlier this week, the stipendiary magistrate had expressed concern at very young children coming before the courts for breaching COVID-19 regulations. He also called for care agency staff to be given powers to restrain the children in their care. What is your take on this, and is there a better way to deal with children rather than arresting them?
Commissioner, if you want to
Yeah.
deal
Yeah,
with
we
that
are very
first
much
and I'll follow.
we are very much alive to the comments of the magistrate, and personally I echo them. I don't think any sensible person wants to see that situation developing and picking up any momentum. There's always room for improvement in terms of the management and care of children, and as such, we are in very close contact with our care agency to discuss improvements and any changes that may be required. Like I say, we do not feel comfortable in having but the police officers on the ground are dealing with the tools available right now. It's a case where we will have to knuckle down and ensure that best practice and measures are in place so that these vulnerable children, I dare say, are not channeled through this particular route like you've explained.
To deal with the last part of your question first, the matter of arrest is a matter exclusively for the Royal Gibraltar Police, so that's not something that I can deal with. But in respect of these vulnerable children in particular, we are going through very difficult times. Children who are in care are going through very difficult times. So the combination of both makes it exceptionally difficult for the matter to be handled. Now, I know that the agencies are working very closely together on this. As you know, we have set up a group, a specific working group in the COVID-19 task force to look at vulnerable people. Vulnerable children is very much one of the things that we are looking at, and children, vulnerable children in care in particular. Children are in care because they were vulnerable to begin with, and therefore we want to take extra care of them when they are brought into the system. So there is a lot of work going on in respect of the support that is given to these children, particularly by the staff, the officers and the professionals at the care agency, social workers and therapeutic professionals, who I have to thank for having to deal with these additional measures in these very difficult times.
Okay, I just wanted to, Commissioner, I just wanted to ask you about following the tweet by the Assistant Commissioner last Saturday. I mean, how hard has it been for you to control this, and your officers to control this large surge of people onto the streets that has occurred on Saturday? And do you expect a similar sort of outcome tomorrow? What sort of measures will you be taking into action in order to prevent any social distancing, which might in itself create another surge, as previously directed by the ministers?
Thank you for that question. A very fair question, seeing the attraction it's had in social media. What I can say is that yesterday was particularly a very testing day for not only the police, but for government, for the Gibraltar PLC. It's the beginning of the easing of measures which are designed to slowly and gradually unlock the restrictions. So the test yesterday has provided a test of how people react to these measures. By contrast, today, I appreciate there aren't any shops open, but today the good weather still prevails, and the whole of Gibraltar is, in my view, and in accordance with the reports I'm receiving from my staff, complying with the regulations. There will be no doubt those few pockets, as we know, but in general, I'm talking there's a overall compliance. So coming back to the question of crowd dynamics, people therefore behave differently from one day to the other. I'm hopeful that if the power of social media has anything positive to come out of it, that people will have learned significantly of yesterday's experience, because what we don't want to do is, from the point of view of policing, is enforce. I've always said that we are rather going on the engagement approach, an explaining approach, an encouraging approach, which is what we did on Saturday. Yes, there were probably more people than we could manage, but that's why I've assigned my part of my address today with that principle of policing, that people need to self-police themselves rather than rely on the strong arm of the law, which are ourselves. People should have that etiquette and understanding and sense of social responsibility. Whether we have any more measures up our sleeve to consider, certainly we will be pulling all our brains together, our tactical brains together, to see how we can best approach this matter and share them with government in case there is a requirement to follow legislation. But bear in mind that we are going through the process of undoing restrictions. What we don't want to do is increase, undo from one point and increase on the other. It's a very socially, it's a social problem that needs to be handled by the people and kept in check by us. But don't for one second think that it's not daunting. It is a daunting task.
The next question is from YGTV for Minister Sacramento and Commissioner McGrail. Two suggestions that have emerged following the increased number of people downtown yesterday are the implementation of a one-way system for pedestrians and the introduction of signs to remind people of social distancing rules. Is the government considering these or similar measures, and are such measures being recommended by the RGP?
Yesterday was the first day of a new release of lockdown measures. And I think that yesterday was a combination of it being a Saturday, it being a very nice day, and people kind of feeling like they could go out, and therefore people taking advantage of it to go to the shops and probably to get quite a good few number of haircuts. Now, we don't know, we have to take this day by day, and we don't know if we will have the same influx on Monday. It's something that we are keeping a very close eye on, something that we are working on very closely with the police, and measures that need to be taken will be taken. In terms of notices and that available in public areas, that's certainly something that we have been discussing, and it seems that people need to be continuously reminded to keep good social distancing, and people need to be reminded of all the public health advice. So I think that that was quite apparent on Saturday, and we're going to have to look at some kind of messaging to continue to remind people even more. But in terms of the operation of how we deal with these things, that's more a matter for the Royal Gibraltar Police, but certainly something that we consult on very closely on a daily basis, and sometimes even on an hourly basis if necessary.
Yes, I have to echo those comments by the Minister. On the question of signage, actually we've today put out billboards, so mini billboards at places of leisure with comprehensive sort of messaging. So people attending those, apart from the fact that there are police officers and customs and GDP officers there physically and who can answer questions, they can avail themselves of these messages on as we've promoted them on these boards at different locations in Gibraltar. Whether we extend that to the to town area, food for thought. Thank you for highlighting that as an idea. We are always open to ideas. We don't proclaim to know it all, because I don't think any police force in the world can hold hand on heart and say that they are the experts at policing pandemics. But we are very peculiar in Gibraltar. We are very close-knit. We are by generally a very law-abiding community, and that is the underlying plea here. Do not force the issue for us to enforce the law. We are asking for a lot of, again, common sense is a word that has been bandied about a lot from the very, very top, from the Chief Minister's mouth, and we need to just really get to grips what that really means in practice. And we know it. We all know it. We all have that sense of social responsibility. It's just applying it.
The next question is from GBC for the Commissioner of Police. The Royal Gibraltar Police, along with Government and Public Health Gibraltar, have tweeted that people should only spend 30-minute stints at the beach and that this will be controlled. How do the RGP plan to enforce this? Well,
we are controlling access. We are not closing the beach. We are restricting access through control measures, which are onerous, they are laborious and resource intensive, because it entails physically having people, officers at the entry points, and then have those officers plodding along to ensure that people don't abuse. We're not using a timer. We're not being clinical, so to speak, in the application of those enforcement measures. We are doing it with a lot of tact and trying to make people understand, and in general terms they are complying. What I want to avail myself of the opportunity is that on many occasions, again on social media where people work each other up, is that there's talk about persons on the beach ignoring police officers' requests. Well, unless that person complaining is next door to or stood a few meters away from the conversation, I do not know how they are hearing that conversation. How can they either lip read or... But it's not the case. The public are being very courteous and respectful of our engagement with our officers, and I thank the majority of the public there. Look, there are very testing times. There are people with children with special needs. There are people... Every person has the individual needs to be out, and therefore we are policing it with a lot of tact, gauging when our officers are of the view that social distancing is being potentially compromised, and therefore that's when we ask people to move on and under a sort of an estimated amount of time to allow fairness for others who want to go down to enjoy the beach too.
Thank you. The Panorama asks, what is the estimate of cost over a monthly period arising of additional policing duties relating to the coronavirus situation? And can we also have a full account of what such duties entail?
Well, in terms of cost, I'm very happy to say that my planners, the commanders around planning this operation, have been very conscious that we don't overspend, and therefore we have redeployed resources from other departments that perhaps have not featured so much in priority, to boost the teams that are dedicated to this type of policing. In essence, what we have is dedicated COVID cops. I hate the term, but unfortunately that's a new slang that's already showing its head. We've got dedicated teams of COVID cops who solely deal with that, and they are becoming subject matter experts, I must say. But equally, the remainder of the teams around what we call area response teams, they are also assigned responsibilities to deal with COVID matters, but are also responding to crime calls. So the essence is that policing efforts are not affected in any way, and cost is not affected. So we are not incurring any costs other than the already forecasted ones because of being public holidays and so forth. There was another side to that, another angle to that question, which was...
What was the estimate of...
I get it now. I remember now. The last part was how we actually deploy. I think I've covered that part, which says that there is a dedicated teams who are following a deployment strategy to obviously be where most of the people are. In good weather, you'll see most of our people in these leisure areas. And so forth, and at strategic roundabouts and arteries that we are going to come across people who are going to show up for being out of their residences when they shouldn't be.
The next question is from the Chronicle.
Commissioner, you mentioned earlier about parents taking extra care with their children online. Has anything particular happened to spark that advice today?
No, this advice is one that we always have argued has to be there in parents' minds. It's just that the fact that youngsters are probably more time at home now than they've ever been. They're already very technologically savvy, and with more time on their hands and perhaps getting on some parents' nerves and locking themselves in their bedrooms, we just want to drive in the message more acutely now than in the past. The measures that I've and advice that I have imparted are actually sound advice throughout any period, whether pandemic or not. But the fact that we are going through these testing times of people being up in the houses, locked up in the houses for quite a normal amount of time, could give a sense of complacency setting in for parents thinking, well, if my kid is quiet in the bedroom, he's okay. Is he? Do we know what he's doing online, or she is doing online? Let's keep those concerns and in the back burner, sort of keep them alive, so that we don't have to regret the situation.
If I can add to that, that is the kind of thing that both the police and the Department of Education would do normally, especially at school. Police officers will come into school and talk to children about the dangers that are online. Teachers do that too. And also the police reach out to parents through school. Now we have a combination of the police not being able to do that through the Department of Education network, but also having children spending more times on this platform. I go back to the COVID-19 vulnerable groups working group that we have, and this is something that we flagged up very early on, and the police, who usually takes the lead on this, are doing a lot of work on it in terms of messaging to remind people, but this is something that they very much do throughout the year in any event. But having had our multi-agency meeting with the Royal Gibraltar Police, Social Services and the Department of Education, it's something that we flagged up, and I know that there is a publicity campaign specifically on this that's been designed for the COVID-19 period, and that will is about to be launched if it hasn't been launched already.
Minister, I just wanted to inquire about the numbers of people you expect to get through the frontier tomorrow as the working week starts again for shops. I mean, will there be any measures to perhaps check the temperature of these people, as was previously suggested in these press conferences, or will there just be a free flow of people, and maybe for the commissioner as well? Will there be any measures taken to sort of ensure social distancing is kept during this coming week?
In relation to the frontier, as you probably know, we already have safeguards in place. We've already acquired some of these thermal temperature devices. They are sort of quite big devices. They're on a tripod, and they monitor someone's temperature as they walk by. So we've already acquired those, and those will be at the frontier. But of course, a temperature is not the only symptom of this, but it certainly could potentially be one of them, and this is one of the measures that we've put in place in relation to mitigate risk. The frontier is not the only place that we have it. You may have seen on social media already that we've installed it at places that need that additional protection, such as the hospital and such as the entrance to Montalvernia and other elderly residential facilities. And in terms of people who are coming through the border, the officers at the border will be checking that people are crossing the border for legitimate business and asking for copies of their employment contract as well.
Yes, I echo that again. I have plain trust that Borders and Coast Guards Agency and Customs will ensure that social distancing rules apply there and that there's not particularly hold-ups, but they're very, very experienced. Remember that they're very experienced people that practically know who comes in, who are workers in, because that's their daily bread and butter. So they are very knowledgeable and experienced at this. Not with the COVID regulations in place, I must say, but it's just adding that bolt-on of ensuring social distancing, which I have plain trust is going to be managed.
Just to follow up to that, do you expect to experience a larger surge of numbers? Like, I mean, the DCM was talking about perhaps 2,000 people coming through the frontier. Do you expect that to double over the coming week?
Well, I can't tell you scientifically whether it'll double or not, but the ease of the lockdown measures means that we will have more people coming in naturally. At the moment, the frontier workers who've been coming in have been predominantly people who work in our hospitals and in our care facilities. Now, because of the relaxation on the businesses, if people from across the border work in businesses, then that will be an increase in relation to that. As you know, there will be further flexibility in the construction sites this coming week as well, so that will have an impact as well. In terms of the way that we regulate the temperature, it's not like you see in other facilities, one of those little devices where you scan people individually. It's a sort of device that's propped on a tripod and can scan people's temperatures, maybe in a more fluid way, so as to alleviate the concern of that creating any kind of build-up of people as they're crossing the frontier. No, it's a thermometer device, but it's placed on a tripod that's sort of the height of a person, and sort of you walk past, and it tells you what your temperature is. You don't physically need a person to come up to another individual and hold the device close to them to be able to ascertain the temperature.
The next question is from the Panorama. When the over 70s walk or drive to one of the 4 exercise areas, what is the element of risk involved for such persons?
There is an element of risk as soon as you leave your front door. We've made that very clear. I've certainly made the point in every single information briefing that I've attended. There is no safer place than being at home. The minute you leave the door, you walk past your front door, whether it's to go to exercise in the golden hour or anything else, you're already at risk of being contaminated. If you need to leave the door and walk down the steps and you need to touch a banister, then that's a risk. If you need to go into the lift and press the lift button, then that's a risk. If you're walking by and need to touch anything for support, that represents a risk as well. If you're driving, it means that at some point you need to fill your car up with petrol. So holding a petrol pump in itself is also a risk. The risks are there. We can mitigate these risks by social distancing and ensuring we follow the rules and wash our hands and try to do everything that we can to avoid it, but the risk is always there.
The next question is from YGTV for Minister Sacramento. It seems difficult to square the government's advice to only go out unless it's absolutely necessary with scenes across the rock of recreational boat trips, lengthy walks, trips to the parks, the beach, strolls down Main Street. Is it not the case that the government's advice is being largely ignored?
What we need to do is, I think we need to look at what is permitted and what isn't. First of all, our starting point is that we're in lockdown. We have a social lockdown going on. The lockdown has been released this past week to take account of certain circumstances. But having said that, we're still in lockdown. Families are perfectly able to leave the house as a household to exercise. The law says that a person can leave home with other members of the household up to a maximum, with other 3 people, so a maximum of 4. And that's perfectly fine for people to go out on a one-off during the day, exercise and come back. Now, exercise means that while they're doing it, they are operating social distancing from other households. It's not an opportunity to go out, and it's not an opportunity to socialize, and it's not an opportunity to catch up with friends or to undertake this exercise with friends. Going out on a boat is permissible. Going out on a boat with up to 3 people from your household is what the law says. Now, that doesn't mean that you can hang around on the pontoon or sunbathe on the pontoon, and certainly not with people who are not from your household. You're allowed to go out on a vessel. You go to the marina, get on your boat, go on the boat, and when you come back, you need to do whatever's essential to make sure that you can rinse the boat properly, and you have to leave. Those are the rules. There are circumstances where people may be flouting the rules and trying to cheat the rules, and that's precisely why I've said what I've said today. But by and large, people are abiding by the rules. If the police find that people are in breach of the rules, as we've heard the Commissioner say, very tactfully, people are reminded of the situation, and if the situation is such that people continue to breach the rules, then the police will take the action that they take. I also want to make special emphasis of provision that is made for children with learning disabilities such as autism, and I've said it in the past, but I would like to reiterate the point. There are some children and adults with autism or other learning disabilities who need to be out of the house and who need to have a particular routine. And we've made account of that, and the Commissioner and I have spoken at length about this and in detail to see how we can make it happen, to ensure that people who need to go out with their children, or a carer who needs to go out with someone who may be on the autistic spectrum, is not stigmatized and is not stopped. People can identify themselves to a police officer discreetly if they are in possession of a disability information card, which is issued by the Ministry for Equality. And we are still operating. The Ministry for Equality staff are there. And if people have a learning disability or an invisible disability and they wish to apply for this card, they may do so online, and applications are processed online. I also know, because we work very closely with the Autism Support Group, that they have issued their members with blue rubber bangles so that they also can be identified when they're out. Because we're all working very closely together with the Royal Gibraltar Police, everyone's aware of this. So there will be that additional level of flexibility for these families. And once again, as I said the last time that I mentioned this in an information briefing, I really call upon people to be sensitive when it comes to these families, and not to point them out and to take pictures and say, oh, such and such was in a particular spot for longer than they should have been. There naturally has to be an element of flexibility for these families. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question is from GBC for the Commissioner of Police. What have been the most common issues the police have encountered this weekend in terms of failure to respect restrictions? And does the RGP have the ability to deploy resources to ensure remaining restrictions are respected as these begin to be eased and Gibraltar moves away from a more blanket lockdown, especially if people fail to adequately self-police?
Okay, I'll start in reverse order with that one, without giving too much away in terms of our operational tactics. From the very beginning, my colleagues at command level came up with a plan to split up the policing of the pandemic into 3 phases, depending on what triggered off another phase and so forth. So we are practically still on the first phase, which only saw a boosting of existing resources and collaboration with our counterparts in GDP and in customs to boost numbers of officers on the front line. But we have further responses if things get worse. And hopefully, touch wood, that's not going to be the case. But we have a second stage, on the basis that if we were to be really, really hit badly by the pandemic, and there was perhaps even a more strict lockdown than what we've ever known so far, then we have contingencies for that. If we had to provide support to the hospital, we have contingencies for that. We've even got contingencies to police mortuaries. It went to that particular detail. And finally, we also have a third stage should all hell break loose, which we are nowhere near, but you've seen it in other parts of the world where people really confront the authorities, confront the rule of law, and public disorder takes place. So we also have measures for that, which entails redistribution of resources, changing of hours of working, and so forth. So in essence, we are ready, but we are ready and we don't want to move away from the stage that we are at in terms of our policing stance.
Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And as ever, please follow the rules. Please follow the official advice. Please follow the public health advice. Please wash your hands. Please stay home. Please stay safe. It's for the benefit of all of us. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.